Well, it was a tight game. It was annoyingly close. It was annoying how tight it was. But the Warriors, nonetheless, I don't know if we ever heard them once utter the phrase winning road trip last year. Yet that's what they already have 3 games in this season. Greg Silver and I are going to break down a winning late afternoon for the Golden State Warriors. This is Locked On Warriors.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA for all lowercase for a first deposit match of up to $100. You can follow Greg Silver on Twitter at Greg Silver with an H. It's OH in the middle. And over on Threads, which is blowing up. There's your heart again, man. I don't know how you're doing that. You can follow Greg Silver on Threads at Greg Silver without the H. Just Greg, the letter O, and Silver. You can follow me, Cyrus Saatsaz, on Threads at Dog Wild. Again, it was a close game. They were, in fact, losing at a certain point in the second half. But then Steph and Curry decided to, just put the Rockets away and remind everyone who's the king. And the Warriors pull away for a final score victory. They won it by 7-11. I'm sorry. They won it by 11, 106-95. Greg, great to see you, man. Your immediate reaction to the Warriors having a winning road trip. How crazy is that? Good to see you.
You know, before anybody complains about anything today, if that's in the chat, if that's at the dinner table, wherever you may be, I just demand that you cherish every single second that number 30 guy steps on a basketball court and plays, because we're never getting this again as fans and viewers, and we're never getting this again with him. And like, a bad game for him ends up being 24 points, I think 7 rebounds, 6 assists, or maybe I flip-flop those numbers on the rebounds and assists, but just like, look at this little guy right here. I want to know what somebody did to hurt him, because he's out there and it's a tight game against a team that they should, in theory, go and win. And it's getting kind of messy in the fourth quarter. And then he decides to turn into the second coming of God. If you're religious at all, he turns into Michael Jordan, if that's your basketball god. Whatever it may be and whatever happens, I almost feel like the Warriors don't deserve that, but I will never apologize for a victory.
What? Yeah, why would you apologize for a victory? You should never apologize. The game was really tight. Then Stephen Curry comes in, lights it up in the fourth quarter, does what Stephen Curry normally does. His box score for tonight's game led all scorers, if I'm not mistaken, with 24 points. And again, he wasn't having a big night. It was relatively quiet until the very end. He made 3 huge 3-pointers in the fourth quarter. Might have made more than 3, but I just remember 3 as the sequence toward the end. Added 7 rebounds, added 6 assists. What immediately stuck out to me, though, in this game was the bench. I mean, the bench, to me, like, in all honesty, man, I'm not saying this to be hyperbolic. I'm not saying this to provide a pro Warrior slant. I really believe if that second unit was their own team, they would be a playoff contending team. Chris Paul came off the bench for the first time ever in his entire career. He's been playing this game professionally at the NBA level for nearly 20 years, and tonight was the first time he came off the bench. I'm glad Steve Kerr did that. And that second unit, again, when you look at the overall box score, every player off the bench was in the positive. Saric was +6. Kuminga was +4. Chris Paul was +22. Gary Payton II, who had a fantastic game, we'll talk about him in a second, was a +13. And Moses Moody was a +11. What did you see from that bench, Greg? And he also wrote something on Threads that said you were going to reveal something on the show tonight. So tell us about the bench and what did you want to get into regarding the Warriors?
Yeah, let's get into both. Answering your question first about the bench, I mean, this is not to take anything away from Kuminga, GP2, Moody, Saric, who've all had great start to the seasons. But I think Chris Paul deserves some flowers here in the first 3 games because there's a big difference between expecting something and what you think is going to happen when there's a change and then it actually coming to light. And the Warriors, we talked a lot over the offseason, both on the show and just in conversation privately about why aren't they trying to catch up to the Nuggets or make moves to counter the Lakers if they're facing them in the playoff series. And we kind of got to the point where we're just thinking maybe they're just concerned internally so much with themselves and making that Chris Paul trade. They wanted a big boy to go and run the second unit. Like that is why Chris Paul is on the team. He's 38 years old. They got to pay him a bunch of money this year,
Yep.
but they know they have one of the greatest players we've seen in the game, the greatest player in their franchise history. And for as far as superstars go, someone who's really unselfish and the only thing he's going to demand is just wanting to win championships and contend for championships. So Chris Paul has been exactly what they needed and what they did trade for in terms of how he's been a leader out there on the second unit. There's been so many little moments that you can see it. And I think one really cool moment is when Gary Payton II had that jump ball around the free throw line area with about 4 seconds left on the shot clock. And then they all, they jump the ball, get it quick, pass it out to Moody. He knows to take the 3, drills the 3 at the shot clock. Like, I'm sure they all would know that, but that Chris Paul is like chirping in their ear constantly about situational basketball, being smart. And the bench, that first half really belonged to them. I mean, it was really the starters that kind of needed a little bit of a kick in the butt to get going. So that's kind of what first impressions on the bench. And look, I know I've said 90% of the schedule is going to be a battle. Rockets, on paper are in that other 10% of games that the Warriors should probably go and win. But this is a team that still plays hard. They have a lot of young talent, and winning on the road is hard, especially when you got a second unit of a lot of young guys led by one big veteran presence. So that's kind of my initial impression on the bench. I can get into the other thing too, but I want to give you a chance to just chime in because I know you had a lot of thoughts on the bench.
No. Go move on, man. What's the other thing? You're rolling. Can you keep it going?
Well, I said on Threads late in the game that as weird as it sounds, I was actually really excited about the fact that the Warriors had a chance to go and clean up this mess and see how they were going to respond into it. And that takes me back to one of the very early moments of the Steve Kerr coaching era. It was late in the first season, and I don't think I had been to a game that year, but it was the second to last game of the regular season. They might have already wrapped up the 1 seed at that point, or maybe with that win, they had clinched it. But, the Warriors, very dominant that year. I think they're playing the Grizzlies at home, and they had a nice little comfy lead in the fourth quarter. And then you see Steph, Klay, Draymond, and those guys spending a lot of time on the bench in the fourth quarter. The lead was probably about 25 to 28 points, somewhere around there. And the Grizzlies in garbage time sort of started like chipping their way back. And it all of a sudden was getting like a little close for comfort at the end. Like not like panic mode, but kind of like, do we need to like put people back in? And so what happened is that Draymond Green on the bench had turned to Steve Kerr and was like, dude, like pull me back in the game. And, of course, being Draymond was being very pushy about it. And Steve Kerr looked over and was like, no, he's like, they created this mess and they're going to have to figure out how to get out of it. And that was something he took from his Phil Jackson days. It was a big Phil Jackson thing right there of just when a group gets into a big mess, you're not going to always have someone to come and rescue you. And so I was kind of excited to see how the Warriors would respond. Granted, it didn't pan out necessarily because they got rescued by Mr. Freakazoid number 30 and hitting those 4 straight threes in a row.
Yep.
But I think, like I said, winning on the road is hard. And I don't care who you're playing. It was a really good opportunity for the Moody's and the Kumingas and people that are looking to grow into a larger role, whether that be with the team or just as an NBA player in general. Really important to kind of just figure it out in these type of games where maybe your star players aren't putting in their normal output and it's kind of stressful and you got the crowd against you, and then you got the young, hungry guys like Jalen Green. He had that and one to put the Rockets on top. Like, that guy can score. You know what I mean? So I don't think the Rockets are going to win a ton of games, but there's no easy outs in the NBA. And I'm glad to see that the Warriors are able to have 2 wins on the road, 9 away from tying last year. We're living good at the end of October. And yeah.
Last year was just such a mess. I'm so glad it is not last year. This team is night and day, and the bench is a huge part of it. We also saw Klay Thompson actually starting to show his old self. That was a huge relief. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Wiggins still struggling mightily. Draymond Green played his first game of the season. We got to give Gary Payton II his love. We also got to get into a little bit why this was as close of a game as it was. I mean, the Warriors had control early on. I think their biggest lead was like 13 or 15. And it was a game that, like, I don't think the Warriors should have let the Rockets back in the way they did. And there were a couple things I noticed. And Greg, I'd love to get your feedback. Everyone who's watching the live program tonight in the chat, we'd love to get your feedback on that. In terms of the why, because there were still facets of the game, I feel, that the Warriors can improve on. So we're going to break all that down and so much more next. I got to give some love to the folks who pay our bills, who fund this operation. First and foremost is PrizePicks. And look, PrizePicks is daily fantasy made super easy. I don't know if I saw some of their TV commercials during the Warriors game tonight. That's how you know they're really starting to make it. They're pumping in ad dollars all over the place. And the premise of PrizePicks is super easy. It's all about betting on whether or not you think certain individual players are going to score more than or less than a certain amount. It could be points, it could be rebounds, it could be assists, it could be blocks, it could be a combination of things. And that's the bottom line. You got to pick a minimum of 2 players, maximum of 6 players. If you actually correctly guess the totals of all 6 players, you can win up to 25 times what you bet. And on certain promo days, that could come out to $1 million. So there's a lot of potential with PrizePicks. I think it's super fun. It's legal here in California. There's nothing sketchy about the cash withdrawals, meaning if you win and you want to take your money out, it's easy. It's simple. And not every website pertaining to daily fantasy sports or gambling can offer that level of easy transactions. And right now, if you put in up to $100 for your initial deposit, they'll match it, meaning whatever amount you put in up to $100, you're going to be playing with double that amount. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match of up to $100. One more time, prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match of up to $100.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. The Locked On Ultimate NBA season preview is here. It's a 6-episode series with all 30 of the Locked On NBA team shows, from contenders to tankers. We go in depth into the biggest storylines heading into the season. I was part of the second group. That's what the Warriors were in. Catch all 6 episodes on Locked On NBA on YouTube, as well as our Locked On Warriors stream. It was uploaded here as well. Again, check it out. It's fun. Greg Silver's fun. You can follow him on Twitter at Greg O. Silver. On Threads, it's also Greg O. Silver. The difference between Twitter and Threads, there's no H in the middle for the Threads account. So it's just Greg O. Silver. And you can follow me, Cyrus Saatsaz, on Threads at Dog Wild. I haven't looked at the chat yet, but let's get into real fast Klay Thompson. I thought he had a terrific start. For the first time all season, and that includes the preseason, it looked like he was in rhythm. It looked like for a change, he was letting the game come to him. He played 29 minutes and change. He was 7 for 12 from the field. He was 5 for 10 from beyond the arc. Also grabbed 4 rebounds. Did have 3 personal fouls. Finished the game with 19 points. How did you feel about Klay tonight? He started to look like the Klay of old. I want to see some consistency. But look, one game in, right? You got to do it one game at a time. Tonight's game, I thought Klay was solid. What are your thoughts?
I felt really good about Klay, and I did in the Sacramento game as well. I know that point of discussion on the show has been if he should come off the bench and maybe give room for some of the younger guys to grow. It's going to be hard for me to ever like really embrace that, but I do think that's the kind of thing that I've started to think about is maybe the type of thing that could be good. But when you get this Klay, I don't think there's a need for it at all, and I'm really happy that he has kind of found a rhythm. I kind of talked about it on social media a little bit how the numbers are nice for sure when he's hitting shots and he seems to be in a groove. But I think what really counts is when he doesn't seem to be forcing shots. Like it kind of goes hand in hand. Sometimes you miss open shots. I think game 6 against the Lakers last year, he had a lot of good looks and just couldn't get his legs underneath him. A lot of them were short. And then sometimes it's the other way around where he's trying so hard to find a rhythm that he's forcing low percentage shots that are hard to make. I don't think he's been doing that in the last couple of games. And it's really nice to see because I think you can see how hard he's trying out there. And I think Klay has certainly shown a sensitive side over the last couple of years for sure. And, it's almost like he needs to be proving himself all the time. And like he could come back from 2 back-to-back brutal injuries and still be that player that he was. And I think if his own fan base is kind of turning against him, that's, he's probably the type of player that would listen to some of that outside noise and get discouraged by him. So I'm really happy to see that he's just kind of been letting the game come to him a little bit. I noticed that Klay and Chris Paul spend a lot of time out there together. And I think that's kind of a nice duo, even though Steph and Klay are the Splash Brothers and they know each other's game like no other. But Chris Paul seems to also be very comfortable with Klay Thompson. And we've kind of seen that in some of these third quarter runs. Today's case, it was more late second quarter. But yeah, so that's all around really fun. And I hope we just kind of continue to see some baby steps with Klay because it's not perfect. We've seen a few stretches where maybe there's some poor decisions or like he's forcing it or gets frustrated after they call a foul or a turnover happens or something like that. But for the most part, really cool to see. And then the fact that he's top 10 of all time 3-pointers made, just another really great reminder of what he has been over the last 10 years for this franchise and the number of incredible moments he's offered.
Absolutely. Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody have taken, in my opinion, a huge leap this season. I don't think we saw enough of them last season. In my opinion, they could have been ready. But look, Steve Kerr is the coach, and that's in the past. He's playing him now. I'm stoked on that. Numbers-wise, neither of them really lit up the scoreboard. Kuminga played 19 minutes, was just 3 of 8 from the field, 1 for 3 from beyond the arc, finished the game with 9 points, only had 2 rebounds. And then Moses Moody played 17 minutes. Not a good shooting night for him as well. Was 1 for 6 from the field, 1 for 5 from beyond the arc. But their positive impact showed on the court. Kuminga was a +4. He scored 9 points. Moses Moody, despite scoring just 5 points, was a +11. There was a weird sequence in the game. Like Kuminga did have some turnovers. I feel like that is the one part of his game right now. Everyone was criticizing him last year for the rebounding. Even though the numbers aren't there yet this year, like you see him playing a lot more aggressively when it comes to the glass. Like he's fighting for boards. You're not seeing him just sitting there watching, right? So I'm not concerned with that part, but the turnovers are a bit of an issue. He had 3 tonight. One thing that was weird though was he had his third turnover. Was it a turnover? Or was it a foul? I think he actually fouled an inbounder.
The end of the third quarter.
Yeah, at the end of the third quarter. And it was a weird sequence because the cameras turned over to Kerr, and Kerr was doing like this gesture with his head, like he wasn't thinking. I don't know what your thoughts were on that. I don't know if I feel like the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I don't know if it's necessarily the smartest thing in the world to be caught on camera ridiculing your player. I don't know. Maybe it's not a big deal at all. What was your reaction to that, if at all?
I didn't think it was a super big deal, to be honest. I mean, with all the games that have been played over the last 9-10 years and, the amount of times that everybody's on camera, I think when you're locked into game mode, even if you're doing it from the sideline as a coach, you're just really focused on what's going on and the camera could be on you at any time. And sure, I can understand how the head gesture might elicit some different reactions from fans and supporters. But at the same time, it did come off of probably the least intelligent play of the day. And it's not a knock on Kuminga. Like, I think he knew it immediately with the
Yeah,
way
he
he
did.
was
He did.
lying on the ground and
Yeah, he did.
players came to pick him up. So I think it was just a bad moment all around. And like Rich Dub says in the chat, a big learning moment for him.
It was
But it's good to
massively.
see that they're encouraged about playing him more. And it seems like the team in particular has really rallied around Kuminga and Moody, but probably more so Kuminga because of that high ceiling he has, just to like play through some of these mistakes and continue to learn, because this is sort of a make or break year for both of those guys. And I think that Kuminga is the type of player that seems a little bit more susceptible to getting down on himself and kind of getting in his own head. So I think it's really cool that we have a lot of vets on the team that are just very encouraging about like, hey, I know you know that's a big mistake. I don't need to tell you that to your face, but let's work through it. I do think fouling in general is the area of Kuminga's game that needs work, because when he plays more minutes, and I know you very much agree with this, Cyrus, the longer he's out on the floor, the more likely that he's going to get into a huge flow of good things one after another. And if he can't control the fouls, it's like a negative feedback loop where he's not going to get into a rhythm. He's not going to play in a very impressive way. The fouls are going to keep him on the bench. And then because he's fouling, the coaches aren't going to want to put him back in anyway. So then when he's back on the floor, everything is more tense and the pressure is heightened. And I've been in these situations before as a nice little varsity high school basketball player. I'm not that cool. But I can understand how it is from the player perspective, just not on the NBA level, just a little far off.
Yeah, and just a play earlier, Kuminga drew a foul on a 3-point shooting attempt. So that dumb play of his evened things out. A few people in the chat who are being really sensitive about Klay Thompson being criticized, like Nyreek Banks, for example, writing so quick to criticize Klay, but defending dumb plays from Kuminga. Look, they're also two players in two very different situations in their careers. I mean, if this was Klay Thompson year 3, you would be hearing very different sentiments from me. There's a stark difference between a player on the up who's very young, who's making mistakes that come with, the naivety of youth, versus a player who is going on 34 and who is a fundamentally important piece of this whole puzzle, and Klay Thompson. And we're wondering right now whether or not he's on the decline of his career. That's not a worry we're having with Kuminga. They're in two very different positions. So take it easy on the sensitivity, please, with Klay Thompson. He is not an infallible human being. So people just get really, really sensitive if you just say one critique about someone. But the whole thing, reason why I bring it up is, again, I just don't know if it's smart to be caught. I mean, the cameras are on you 24/7. If Klay had done the same thing, right? Because Klay made some mistakes tonight as well. He had a good game, but he also had some dumb plays of his own. I mean, if you want to bring him up, there's a plenty of them in my notes. For example, late in the game, Klay missed a wide open 3-pointer, and then right after that fouled a Jalen Green on a drive to the basket that kept the Rockets close in the game. I could bring that up too, and I just did, because again, I was for the most part highlighting Klay's positivity tonight, but they're just in very different positions in their career. My point is, if Kerr had done the same thing, doing some sort of gesture to his head, like use your brain, to Klay, I'd be saying the same thing. Like, I don't know if it's very smart to be doing gestures like that in front of the camera. I don't know. I just don't understand where the wisdom is in publicly, making gestures that, criticize a player. I don't see where the positive is in that. I don't understand how that's a smart thing to do. It's not a big deal. But again, to see it on the camera, all these players see and hear everything. I just don't know how it's conducive for Kuminga to later on hear from someone else, hey, did you see your coach basically calling you a dumbass in front of the camera? Like, I don't see how that's smart. That's my whole point, right? Like, you can suppress those emotions as the head coach, especially when you consider the relationship last year with Kuminga publicly expressing disappointment and not playing in that Lakers series. And then here you have this year, yes, Kerr's giving him the minutes, but then all I'm saying is refrain a little bit from the public gestures that everyone in the world is seeing. You're on the sideline. Like, there are better ways to handle that. That is all my point is. I don't know, whatever. We're going to have one final segment. And again, if you're going to call people names, you're going to get blocked. All right. I'm perfectly cool with having live shows and having a chat. But I'm not cool with disrespect. I'm not cool with name calling. So if you disagree with me in a manner that is specific, that's logical. If you're going to just call people names, you're out of here. Okay, let's make that premise very, very simple here and to the point. So, anyways, and Greg, I'll give you a chance to rebut that if you want. But I have to give some love first, real fast, to FanDuel, the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. Let me get the overlay here real fast. And look, the Niners did not cover their spread today. The Niners had an awful game today. This is not a Locked On Niners show, but right now we're in the NFL season, and that's what FanDuel is all about this time of year. And right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, whether it's spreads, player props, over-unders, and so much more. So visit FanDuel.com/locked on and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right. Thank you very much for joining Locked On Warriors. Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. For you everydayers, we're back at it tomorrow. Kylan Mills is going to join me for the back end of a doubleheader, a back-to-back, between the Warriors and the Pelicans. So make sure you join us for that. You can follow Greg Silver on Threads at Greg O Silver, O without the H. And you can follow me, Cyrus Saatsaz, on Threads. Me, Cyrus Saatsaz, at Dog Wild. And again, and Nugsy Bogues, for example, is writing, I'm overreacting to that. That's your opinion. I in my opinion, if you're the head coach of a team, hold your personal feelings away from the camera. Don't show that stuff publicly. Greg, what's your reaction to what I just said about Kerr publicly showing his disdain for Kuminga's foul?
I mean, like, objectively, it might not be the best look, but I'm maybe a little bit more just kind of in the back seat, and maybe with some of the people in the chat just saying that, it's kind of how it goes in the professional business, behind closed doors at practice. They spend so much time together all the time. Competition is intense. Emotions surely get high. And I think, like I said a little bit earlier in the show, I think that, you got cameras on you all the time when you're a high profile team in a professional sport. So they're probably not too concerned with everything that's on camera. I can understand how, any shot or tweet or statement that could be taken out of context or just on its own could certainly look a lot worse than it is. But I think the thing I would just say is that I don't think Jonathan Kuminga himself would go and defend that play that he made very much anyway. So I think it's all good. I think that as long as we don't hear anything about the relationship between Kerr and Kuminga going off of a waterfall or anything in the coming weeks, then I'm sure they're going to work through it just fine. And I think they'll be all good. You're muted.
Thank you for that. And that's a huge reason why I bring this up, is because it's not like the relationship between Kerr and Kuminga was copacetic. It's not like things are rosy between the two. I mean, Kuminga was literally publicly lambasting his role, not playing at all in that series last year. And so I do wonder if maybe public gestures like that should just not be happening. I don't know. I just don't think it's the smartest thing. And for folks out there who, again, Corey Schneider here, if I'm pronouncing your name right, saying that I've grown into Klay's number one hater. I don't know what to say to you about that. There's no hatred in simply pointing out that Klay's game has regressed. Would you like me to bring up again that Lakers series last year? Because I can easily pull that up. Here, in fact, I'll do that right now, just in case people are forgetting that Klay Thompson is a human being, and he might be on the downside of his career. The man is also not getting a contract extension because he wants a near max deal, which is insane, which is absolutely insane. And if you need a reminder again for how Klay Thompson did in the postseason last year, he averaged 36 minutes per game. He shot just 38% from the field. I'm trying to find the specific. I don't need to get into this, but he averaged 18 points a game. The point is, look, he regressed drastically from February, where he had this outstanding month statistically. He regressed in March. He regressed even more so in April. He had an awful postseason. I don't know how you could justify that Lakers series. And so far to start this season, tonight was the first good game he's had. I mean, one game, and suddenly people are sitting here upset because I, God forbid, criticize Klay Thompson, who is not playing good basketball right now. Another player, by the way, who's not having a good season is to start the season is Andrew Wiggins. And Andrew Wiggins did not have a good game tonight. In fact, you could point a finger almost directly at him in terms of why the Rockets came back in this game and made it close. Andrew Wiggins' stat line: he played 28 minutes. He was 4 for 10 from the field, 1 for 3 from 3, a -4 in the plus minus. Finished the game with 13 points, had 2 turnovers as well. I don't think he's found his offensive rhythm yet. I don't know if it's something as simple as that. He was forcing a lot of shots. He had a decent second quarter. He made a 3, followed by missing another 3 right after that. That was bad. He had an ugly turnover. I don't know. His shot isn't there yet. I don't see his rebounding being super clutch yet. Considering that the Warriors routinely play small ball. Andrew Wiggins tonight had a whopping total of 0 rebounds. 0. What do you think is going on with Andrew Wiggins, Greg? Why do you think he's struggling so much?
If I had to just take one guess at it, I think it would be, it's been a while since he's played sustained stretches of NBA games. I thought he actually did pretty well in the playoffs last year, coming in cold after missing a bunch of time due to the family matter. And I thought he actually looked pretty well in the Kings series and was serviceable in the Lakers series. And he got hurt before Game 6. Was that the case? And clearly did not look right out there in that elimination game. So I just think Wiggins hasn't played a sustained stretch of basketball for a while. You can't really replicate the environment of an NBA game. Last season, he had injuries. He had the family matter. He wasn't playing long stretches. The year before, he obviously became an all-star starter, which at the time everyone was like, what the F? Then in the playoffs was great throughout that run. And people often say second best player, and certainly the second most steady and consistent when you consider how he was as a two-way guy, offense and defense. So I've said this, I can't remember if it was on the show a couple times ago or maybe just on social media or in conversations with friends. But after the first game, I was just thinking that I would way rather have someone like Wiggins look a little bit lost and struggling out there, or kind of how Draymond Green did today in his first game back, than it be like your Moody's and your Kumingas and guys that we're expecting to take a leap. Because I think that it's still early enough in the season to where we shouldn't really be too concerned with Andrew Wiggins at this point. Maybe he is a little bit banged up. Maybe he's not. But I just think that there's going to be a lot of lineup variation we see in these coming weeks. I think that this team has a lot to do to figure each other out.
Yeah.
But the one thing that we can see is that with all this talk over the offseason about how, we want to be connected, we want to have commitment to one another, we want a cohesive unit and high IQ and all this connectivity, I think you can see that that is a real focus when they're out there on the floor because of the way they're experimenting with lineups and seeing the types of chemistry that works with different players. So yes, Andrew Wiggins has certainly struggled to start the year, but it is just 3 games in, and I would much rather see what we've seen from your Gary Payton IIs, your Moody's and Kumingas, and Saric has had his moments for sure. And if this is still the case a month from now, then we can probably start talking about me being concerned about Wiggins.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason why Wiggins is such a focus is because this struggle is a carryover from last season. He didn't have last year was nothing to write home about. He missed a lot of the year, granted, because of injury and because of the personal situation that he had regarding his dad, where he missed a lot of time, and then he came back and just had an abysmal postseason. And ultimately, look, he's their 3rd highest paid player in the roster, 3rd or 4th. They need him. I mean, if the Warriors are going to win a championship, he's going to be needed. So let's hope he turns this thing around. You mentioned Gary Payton II, by the way, had an outstanding game tonight. In 18 minutes, 44 seconds of play, was 6 for 8 from the field, was 3 for 4 from beyond the arc. That corner 3 is back. He also, one of the threes he made was actually from the edge of the key. It was actually from the corner, not from the corner of the court, but it was from the elbow,
free throw line extended.
Yeah, free throw line extended, but the elbow though, not from directly behind the free throw line. And so he made one from there. he was awesome. I mean, we could talk all we want about his defense, which is exemplary, but when he's playing like this offensively, and he also added 3 steals, he also added 4 rebounds. He's clutch as long as he's close to the rim. I mean, tonight he really, I thought, fit the adage of the little big man. Anything you want to add about Gary Payton II? Fantastic game from him, in my opinion, tonight.
No, I think you covered it great. The only thing I would add is that you can stick him in the Andrew Wiggins category of guy that was not physically right last year at any point.
Yeah.
And and now you could see him a little bit more back in form. Of course, it's taken him there hasn't been a little bit of a slow start to the season like we've seen from Wiggins, but just another reminder that Gary Payton II was an important piece on the championship team. He is a trusted player that will be able to play in big spots, not a scorer, but a great instinct for cutting to the basket when it matters. And he can get a little sneaky with those threes too, but he's certainly out there for that defense. And if the Warriors do want to go small at times, then Gary Payton makes it so he can be one of the guards out there because of what a good on-ball defender he is and how high he can get up despite being a 6'2" player. So it's just fun to watch him. He just kind of has infectious energy, in my opinion, and that's what's made him a great fit for Dub Nation. I know he didn't really get to play much for Portland, but certainly happy to have him back because he is certainly fun and kind of a stabilizing force that has been missed over the last year and a half or so.
Do you think there were points in this game tonight? The Rockets are a long team. At times, they looked a lot bigger than the Warriors. I want to see more Trayce Jackson-Davis, and I also want to see more Brandon Podziemski. I do feel like they could be useful in games like this. Brandon Podziemski, again, part of the reason he was drafted was because he's a point guard who can grab 8-9 rebounds a game. He averaged 8.8 last year for Santa Clara. Trayce Jackson-Davis, we finally saw him in Sacramento, and I thought he looked great in that game. I felt like he could have been useful tonight. Do you care at all that we're not seeing these guys get minutes? I mean, we haven't seen Brandon Podziemski play once. Does that matter to you at all?
I actually don't care a lot. And that's just because if you look at the 10 in that second unit, how good they have been. I think if it was up in shambles, like we were seeing last year, I'd be a little bit more fed up and eager to see these guys. And of course, I want to see Trayce Jackson-Davis. I think, especially for a team that doesn't have size, it'd be good to get him out there when we can. This game did not turn into a blowout and ended up being really tight down the stretch. So I get it. Good to see him get action against the Kings. Podziemski is on a team with a bunch of great guard play. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. And I'm not saying this is like a foregone conclusion, but certainly something I think is worth throwing out there over these first 3 games is that this bench has the chance to be the best bench the Warriors has had since 2016.
Yep.
And that's no disrespect to 2022 because that was a championship team. But, really was a few people in that 2022 reserves, namely Jordan Poole and Otto Porter, that were taking on a huge load of the second unit duties. This is a really more complete 10-man unit where I think when you were kind of seeing in 15-16, you had that second group. Was it your Sean Livingston, Leandro Barbosa, Andre Iguodala, Maurice Spates, and Festus Ezeli. And that was a great second unit. And let's not forget how many fourth quarters Steph Curry just didn't play in an MVP season because of how much that second unit could keep things afloat and then beyond some with extending it. So I'm really excited about this bench. I do want to see some Trayce Jackson-Davis and some Brandon Podziemski, but it's not something I'm going to beg for until I see a problem with the second unit. I think we're all eager as fans, and in general, we're very like in the moment people in sports. I know that's what Alexis Gray Lawson used to play at Cal and the Phoenix Mercury. She brought that up to me one time, and it's very true. We can be very in the moment people, but it's kind of just like I'm excited for what's to come for them, but I'm not freaking out about them not getting minutes so far into the season.
Yeah, I just feel like they could be useful. I don't think it can hurt to have them out there, but and especially the earlier you play them, the more prepared they'll be later in the season for the big games when they actually will count a lot more. But look, a win's a win. A lot of anytime we critique in a night like this, you can call these nitpicks, and that's fine. But the big picture here is a championship. This is not a Warriors team but like the Warriors are not in the Rockets level. It's not like we're not going to celebrate moral victories here. We're not going to celebrate the Warriors being a team that might finish in the top 4 in the seedings. No, this is championship or bust. And when that happens, you are going to nitpick. You are going to find the little things and try to correct those. So, and that's honestly what we're seeing here. Real quick, finishing it up. The Warriors did turn the ball over a lot tonight. They had 14 turnovers. The Rockets just had 7. That's a huge reason why they stayed in this game. When you look at the turnovers, Draymond had a lot of dumb ones. You could tell, though, that was attributed to rust, him having not played yet. In his first game tonight, he had 4 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. Kuminga also had 3 turnovers, and then the rest were just sprinkled out. I mean, 14 is not a huge number, but the fact that the Rockets only had 7 is kind of wild. And that's where I sometimes look at the length of your team, the size of your team, because when you have size, it's easier to cause turnovers, getting your hands in passing lanes, getting blocked shots. So I just want to throw those stats out there. Any last thoughts, Greg, as we finish up the show tonight?
Fourth quarter, baby. It's game time.
Dude, like when you showed me those shades before we started recording, you had like the Trace Jack. I thought you were pulling off. I'm sorry, a Dylan Brooks impersonation, because I feel like he has shades like that. What is the purpose of those shades, Mr. Cool?
Well, I am Lightning McQueen for Halloween, so that's the real answer.
Right,
I would say
go.
that Steph Curry got fire in his eyes. It was a little freakish, and then also, if you want to throw Dylan Brooks in there, just considering me jumping up into the flames on a pump fake and getting burned, it happens. It's okay.
I love it. Anyway, so we'll be back at this tomorrow. Kylan's going to join me. Warriors and Pelicans. The Pelicans are looking good. I will say this. The Warriors, they won tonight, but they're going to have to step it up if they're going to win that game tomorrow, especially with it being a back-to-back. Maybe we'll see Pajemski, and maybe we'll see Trace Jackson-Davis in that game. I would love to also see Usman Garuba. We haven't had a chance to see him yet. I would not mind his 6'8" frame out there as well. If you follow me on Threads, I posted an exclusive Usman Garuba quote from both him, the player, and from Steve Kerr. I got a question into him all the way here in the Bay Area. Thanks to Jackson Gadlin, who hosts Locked On Rockets. He asked questions for me anytime the Warriors are in town, and he actually asked Kerr about Usman and what his feelings are on that. So if you follow me on Threads, that clip is there, exclusive. You won't see that anywhere else. And follow me there at Dog Wild. Greg, it is always a pleasure. And again, the Warriors are now 2-1. Great start to the season. They're on a winning streak on the road. They've already won a road trip. This is absolutely incredible. So bravo to the Golden State Warriors. And we'll be back at it tomorrow. Are we done? Did we cover everything we need to cover tonight, Greg?
I guess the last thought I would say real quick is just that these types of games, it was a little ugly. It was a little annoying, as you put it, coming into it. But winning these types of games are the ones that are going to make life a lot easier when March and April come around. So everything counts. 2-1 is good. 2-0 on the road. I'm into it, baby. I'm feeling good. I got to answer my brother's text asking me how I feel about this Warriors team and just do a whole lot of positivity. Maybe I'll even wear the glasses for it.
And Corey, you're an absolute idiot, dude. Anytime Klay is a big game, I'm going to cancel the show out of anger. Like, do you really think I have personal negative feelings about Klay Thompson? You're out of your freaking mind. So yeah, you're just dumb. I don't know what else to say about that. But anyway, everywhere else, we all good otherwise. We had one dummy in the chat. Everyone else is cool. Good stuff. All right. We'll be back at it tomorrow. Thank you, everyone. You got the fireworks going. Peace out. The Warriors are now 2-1. Bye-bye.
Go Dubs.
Love it.